Right. Well, welcome back, everybody, and welcome to session 10, which should have started at 3 o'clock. It's now 3:30, so we're 30 minutes behind. I think we are going to overrun. There's no question about that. But what I'd like to do is introduce Conor Dooley from AGGREKO. AGGREKO joined the WLPGA 3-4 years ago when I went to your offices in London and spoke to Noreen Howard and Dave Palmer. I don't think I met you before, Conor, so you're in Ireland at the moment. AGGREKO is in the what's the best way to describe it? I was going to say part-time, temporary power generation. Is that a reasonable sort of one-liner? And yeah, and I remember the discussion I had with your colleagues 3 or 4 years ago, and you were getting pressure from your customers to put power generation systems in on site for events and other activities, and you were getting pressure from your customers. They did not want diesel. They did not want these emissions floating around the Queen's garden party or the Olympics or whatever else you were supporting, and they wanted something cleaner. And you wanted to switch away from diesel to LPG, and I think you've done that very, very successfully. Looking at some of the case studies. So, Conor, welcome, and you're going to tell us a little bit about your business and how to create power with a virtual pipeline.
Thank you, David, very much, and thanks for hosting me today and having me here. It's always nice to explain our business a little bit better, but it's also timely because we're also, the word transition is almost beaten to death nowadays. Everybody is in transition, but we know more than anybody else, as David just mentioned, are under our own set of pressures because we operate in effectively what's a diesel, oil and gas, fossil fuel environment. And as David said, we are being asked by our customers, not just by ourselves, to raise and to answer the challenge of how we can produce cleaner power for our customers. So just in case you missed it in terms of who we are, David was trying to get it in one line. I think the best way to describe AGGREKO is we would be regarded as a world-leading provider of mobile and temporary power and temperature control and general energy services. But the energy market is rapidly changing. Our current focus could probably best be described as to solve our customers' challenges because they need cost-effective, flexible, and increasingly greener and less carbon-intense solutions. Our main market, just to put this in context, is, which is global electricity demand. This is forecast to rise by up to 70% by 2050. But the nature of how that electricity is generated and will be generated is changing dramatically. So like many other companies, we have committed to help our customers reduce their carbon footprint. And the main pathway for AGGREKO is to gradually reduce, as David said, our dependence on diesel fuel by switching as many of our customers as possible to gas. For the last 8 or 10 years, we've been building and introducing gas generators to our fleet. So we have already begun that displacement of diesel. And while the primary gas still remains natural gas, especially where there is plenty of natural gas pipelines at our customer locations, for customers where there are no gas pipelines, and there are many, mining is a great example, some oil and gas applications, LPG, which can be trucked or brought by any means of transport to our customer sites, is becoming an increasingly important fuel for us. So LPG is increasingly relevant for us. And what I'm going to do on this slide and in this few minutes is just explain to you what it means to us and give you some examples and case studies of where we've been able to use the gas. So first of all, if we could look at the next slide, which shows some of the sectors we service. We do operate globally in up to 80 countries, so it's no surprise then that we service a lot of different sectors. Our purpose, by the way, we've rewritten our company purpose only in the last 6 months, and it is to power progress by delivering energy anywhere. That's what we do. And powering progress is not simply producing energy. It's powering, we see it in the wider context of powering progress of the planet. And if we can lead our customers through the energy transition and help them achieve their carbon reduction goals, we will definitely be powering progress. So if you look at the sectors that we operate in, you know, typically we are temporary. We do not sell generation equipment. We come in and provide the service. It can be from a week, it can be to 5 years, or it can be longer contracts. But typically we are in the 3 to 5 to 6 year range. That's how we're best known. We bring our equipment, we bring our services, and we then take them away at the end of the contract. We do utilities. We're in manufacturing. Mining, where there's no electrical grid or no gas supply, is a typical solution that AGGREKO can tackle. We're in the oil and gas sector, petrochem. Emerging sectors, you know, are including data centers, and the building and construction services business, especially in downtown cities where air quality is increasingly a challenge, is where we are bringing some of our cleaner generators to provide our services. So on the next slide, you can just see some of our building blocks of equipment. We are fairly recognizable. ISO 20-foot containers contain typically 1 to 1.5 megawatts of power. They run on, besides diesel, of course, they run on gas and LPG. Our first generators, gas generators, were designed to run on natural gas, but we are now running slightly modified generators to take LPG and are doing so very successfully. By the way, just out of interest, we're also other ways we're transitioning is not just by adding gas to our customer options, but we are also now very much a battery storage company. We acquired battery technology about 3 years ago from a German company, and we've absorbed it into the AGGREKO offering. And where batteries are useful is where there are sudden demands in power, like step changes, as we call them. And your typical generators don't like that too much, but a battery will take the step up in charge and give the generator 10 or 15 seconds to come up to speed. So you can see our building blocks on that slide. They are everything that will enable generation of electricity by diesel or increasingly by gas, and in this case LPG, as I'm going to show you in a few moments. So if you look then if what temporary generation brings, and not just AGGREKO, if you look at some of the reasons people would require temporary power and what benefits it brings, it's very easy to see it. Unlike building traditional power stations, it's rapid. You know, we can be on site and up and running. Well, our traditional diesel sets can be up and running, you know, in an hour or less. You know, if it's a larger plant, it needs a bit longer to connect cabling and distribution. But think the temporary power is also very, very quick to do so. Everything is brought in building blocks. It's modular, and as long as our client's ground is relatively flat, we are just placing sets and generating power very quickly. I don't propose to go through all of the typical benefits that you can see on slides like this, but it is we bring everything. You know, when we say turnkey, it means we bring the generation, we bring the cabling, we bring the transformers, we bring the distribution. We can get connected to the electrical grid. So if a client just needs 20 megawatts of energy, that's what we deliver. We bring 20 megawatts of energy and have it up and running as quickly as we can. It means no capex for the customer. We also manage fuel. If a customer does not want or is not skilled in dealing with fuel, be it diesel or gas, we'll arrange that for them as well. And that is what you get when you look, you know, when you are a client in need of some temporary generation. On the next slide, there's a couple more, which again, I won't go on through in detail. But clearly, from a financial point of view, to the financial people in the room, clearly there is a reduced risk when a company like AGGREKO, where we are quoted on the London FTSE 250 stock exchange, you know, we're going to be around, and we have the working capital to come in and fund these models. We're also flexible. You're typically PPA, which is a power purchase agreement. In other words, a contract to supply and to buy power for a long period. We will off-hire our generators, you know, as soon as the client wants. If they want a 1-year contract, great. If they want 6 months, we can do that, and so on. So you can begin to see where the world of temporary power generation sits in global power generation. So if we look then very quickly at what the typical gases that we are using, Natural gas includes, of course, liquefied natural gas and compressed natural gas. The difference is they're both natural gas. One is liquefied to a very low temperature and turned into liquid form, and the other is simply a compressed gas. But LNG, CNG, they're both natural gas, and they can be used in our generators. LPG, yes, we use it, and we are interested in markets where LPG is growing rapidly. We see many of the African countries, we see countries like Bangladesh, a lot of the island nations where there is no established infrastructure for natural gas, and the growth of LPG is rapid in a lot of different geographical regions in the world, and we will be there to plug our generation into them. And the final thing about it, our types of generation, is because it can handle natural gas or liquefied petroleum gas, what you're getting there is a methane spectrum that is quite different. And our technicians and our setup guys will take whatever gas is available and ensure that the maximum power output can happen. So there you can see where LPG sits quite naturally side by side with natural gas in terms of how to generate power. So looking at just the next couple of slides in our deck, anyone interested in efficiencies or lack of efficiencies in gas doesn't have to worry, because gas engines are typically more efficient than diesel engines, and in some cases, some of the engines that AGGREKO uses are typically GE or Jenbacher nowadays. They're called 420 engines, which are as efficient or better as many comparable diesel or gas turbine sets. And the next slide, I think, finishes this one, which gives an indication of how efficient the engines can be. There is one other slide, I think, which shows two bars stacked side by side, and this shows a comparison to diesel. So not only is a gas product much less carbon intensive, but it's actually more efficient. You're getting more, I suppose, bang for your buck in terms of generation, and that to any client is really important when the cost of energy is calculated. So the next picture should show, I think, a comparison. This is not for, this is information that is available as reference information, but if people are running diesel plants and they want to look at gas, it's very easy for AGGREKO or a company involved in power generation to do the comparisons in terms of efficiency, in terms of the cost, because gas will always be cheaper than diesel to run it. So if you're running a lot of fuel, you want to get into gas if you can. And if gas traditionally hasn't been available, but it is now available in ways, for example, like trucked gas, like LPG, the calculations are there, and it is very easy for companies like AGGREKO to show how we can produce energy using LPG, which compares very favorably compared to diesel. So that is a reference slide. Those of you who are downloading the pack will be able to have a look at that in your own time. So let's have a look at a couple of case studies. This is a good one. The St. Croix is in the US Virgin Islands in the Caribbean. And this is a typical example where we can come in where there's a client, in this case, the local utility for St. Croix, and they had a problem with their existing plant. It's quite common in island countries that the main generation is through diesel. But the old diesel plant really had to be done and had to be fixed. Also, because they were experiencing failures, the need for a quick mobilization of a plant was really important. So that falls into what we do. We can do it quickly. We can get our generators on site very fast. But in this case, they were also looking at a cleaner energy. They just didn't want to replace diesel with diesel. So what we've done, for the next number of years, we will have our temporary power station in St. Croix using LPG. Now, this was a great case study for us as well, because it enabled us to understand how well LPG could work in up to 20 megawatts of power. That is a lot of power for an island nation. We were able to use this as a really great field trial for our own, what we call our NGG, our next generation gas generators. So because LPG is so much cleaner than diesel, the dividend to the authorities in St. Croix is immense, because they get the diesel, the association with diesel is disappeared, The emissions of the fairly unregulated plants that exist in diesel are gone. LPG is a much cleaner fuel. The site is cleaner, and also they are saving a lot of money. So St. Croix and a neighbouring island where we are also installing another similar LPG generation station is a great example of a medium-term project where a company or a customer needs LPG to do a job. So a fantastic case study, we believe, in the utility of LPG to generate power on a reasonably large scale. The other case study I thought was interesting is much more recent, and it comes from Texas in the United States. Those of you, it's on the next slide. Those of you who had watched the news from the United States in February will be aware that there were real challenges when unseasonably cold conditions in Texas. I think they described it as once in a lifetime snowstorms in Texas. And Texas was not a state that is well equipped to deal with snow. But what happened was they then lost a lot of utility power. If we can't get onto that slide, I'll just describe it for you. They were unable to get it was record low temperatures, and the roads were completely impassable in local areas. The state's electric grid operator lost control of the power supply, and it left millions in the state of Texas without electricity because of the snowstorm. So the solution we delivered, now we did some natural gas solutions as well, but because some areas we found it difficult to truck natural gas to the solution, we were able to install up to 5 megawatts of power. Now that's a lot of individual generators using LPG. The slide is on the screen there, you can see it. So the impact on this example, and it's a real live case study, just 6 weeks ago or about 2 months ago, is that this was an emergency solution. We had to deliver this in 1 to 3 days. And it just shows you that if you can get the infrastructure suppliers going, if the infrastructure is there, and of course one thing Texas has going for it, it has a great infrastructure of local gas suppliers. We were able to partner with suitable local suppliers to bring gas, LPG, to get our generators running and to support the grid. In total, we did about 50 megawatts of power in various parts of Texas. But the real example for us that we're very proud of is that we could deliver LPG on a very short time frame. So the St. Croix example, the Texas example, there are two ends of the AGGREKO spectrum. One is building a medium-term power station, which we're happy to do. We can do that with LPG and have done so. But the other one is a newer, I guess, feather in our cap, the ability to deliver LPG solutions to emergency situations. And I think the Texas solution and situation was good. We also did the same, by the way, in the southern U.S. last year when Hurricane Laura hit shores in Louisiana and Arkansas, and we were there with our LPG solutions. So I thought it was interesting to bring those two case studies with us today. And the Bangladesh one I'm not going to go into because it's natural gas, but it just shows that it's seamless what we do. To us, a power project is a power project. Whether it's diesel or whether it's natural gas or LPG, we can do it. But the good news is that LPG is really the coming gas. It's ideal for certain applications. It's ideal for territories and countries that are building up their LPG infrastructure. It's ideal for island nations where they're just not big enough to have a large LNG infrastructure or natural gas. So there are a couple of examples of LPG we thought might be interesting to talk about today, where LPG is involved in direct power generation. So I think I'm nearly there. I think there's one or two other slides. The next slide simply just shows you the inside of what our generator looks like. For those of you who are interested, the bottom of it is the engine part. The engine burns the gas. The golden color is the alternator, which converts the engine movement to electricity. And the top frame is typically heating and cooling elements and exhausts that takes the gases and the temperatures away. So a little bit of an inside view there in what a typical AGGREKO gas generator looks like. So I think the purpose of today was to mainly introduce us to those of you who are not as familiar with AGGREKO, but more importantly, how power generation is possible using LPG. It is a gas definitely of the future. Because we're in 80 countries, we are keen to apply LPG solutions in any country where LPG is available and where it is the best solution for delivering power. So I'd like to thank everyone again for having us join you today. I hope that was of some interest to you. My contact details are there and in the pack. And if there's any questions or inquiries, I'll be happy to take them from the attendees at any time. Thank you to everybody.
Conor, thanks ever so much for that. There is one question that's just come through, but I've got a comment to make. The Texas case study, we actually put together a compendium of case studies on how LPG has helped countries in natural disasters. Japan, for example, going back to 2011, I think it was, when they had the earthquake and the tsunami, and also the Asian tsunami that impacted Indonesia and Thailand and Sri Lanka and others, and how LPG actually helped, especially in the early days. Like you said, in Texas, you got in there very quickly within days. So I think that would make a great addition to our little case study library. That's the first point.
Happy to send the details when we get it written ourselves. It's very recent, David.
No worries. And then the other question I was going to ask you was, I know in Africa and Asia as well, there's predominantly, when we talk about LPG, we talk about predominantly a butane-rich mixture. Yes. Now, is there any preference for the sort of LPG that your generators might wish to receive when they find themselves in some of these countries? Are you sort of a predominantly propane favored or what?
Propane runs easier in our generators, but as always, gas mix. There's a spectrum, isn't there, of LPG. Propane is our gas, our first choice gas. It works best, and those examples you've seen are propane examples. But our engines are flexible. Butane is the next challenge for our engineers. But I'd be happy to stay in touch with you guys and keep you informed as to how we're doing on butane. It is the next alkane out there, and it's related to, as we know, to propane. So I think bear in mind propane and AGGREKO first, and then we're looking at butane, as you can imagine. Because when you consider some of the liquid fuels that we've put to our diesel generators over the years, I think we're only beginning to understand the flexibility and the abilities and capabilities of our gas generators. So it's a moving story, David, and we'd be happy to keep the association informed. That
would be good. And the other question really I was going to ask was, looking at all the benefits when you compare yourself LPG versus diesel, one thing I didn't see there was noise. Is there any difference in the noise level of an LPG powered generator compared to a diesel powered generator, or are they very, very similar?
The noise, it depends really on the acoustic lining of the set. It's sort of independent of the engine. And generally it depends on the environment we're working in. Traditionally our environments have been away from noise since what we call receptors, like houses, like schools. But where we are closer to those, we tend to do noise surveys and make sure that the attenuation is there. We won't generalize on them. It depends more on the engine design than the fuel, David. And we have a lot of different types of engines. We work on Volvo platforms in diesel. We work off GE on gas. So there's no general answer to your question, but noise will always be a key consideration in any application that we land. I'm not sure I've answered your question directly there, David, because there's no single answer to it, if that makes sense.
No, I asked it because I just know that diesel engines are noisy compared to spark.
By the way, in our, not necessarily our own, ours, but we've seen pretty noisy gas engines as well. So you've really got to understand where they're going to be sited. If they're in the middle of the bush, it doesn't really matter in a mine. But if you're in a city, it does matter. We take care of those things.
Yep, no worries. And the question is on the Q&A box: what are the initial capital outlay costs compared to diesel-fueled engines? So if we're looking at a diesel application versus an LPG application, is there any real difference in capital cost?
Is that capital for AGGREKO or capital for the client?
Well, like you've explained that there's no capital liability with the consumer, so your capital, isn't it?
Our gas generators tend to be more expensive. For a 1 megawatt platform in diesel versus a 1 megawatt platform in gas, just for example, we would put the gas generators about between 30 and 40% more expensive. So therefore, megawatt for megawatt, the rental we would then charge out, the capacity charge would be in that category more expensive for a gas generator. But because gas tends to be a cheaper fuel than diesel, when you're running it over the medium and long term, the savings, that's where the savings come from the customer. But to us, yes, it's a more capital intensive asset, David.
Yeah. And I know maintenance costs on a diesel engine are higher than a gas engine, generally speaking, as well. Okay. Thank you is the next response. So I think you've answered the question. Okay. All good, Conor. Thank you so much indeed. Very interesting. And let's keep in touch because it's a very important part of our portfolio, power generation. We have a power generation working group that Michael Kelly's involved with. So I know that Michael's been in touch with AGGREKO anyway, but I think that case study, certainly we should chase that one up when you've written it.
We would. Happy to look, David. Thank you and the team, and thank you to all those who attended today and listened to us. Thank you.
No, it's very interesting, Conor. Thank you very much indeed. And to everybody else, if you could go up to the stage again and log on to the penultimate session, which is the digital innovation technology. So join that and